you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name's Kevin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Eric. Welcome back to our 33rd episode this week, where we have a special guest, many of you may know, former Patriot linebacker and three-time Super Bowl champ, Matt Chatham. Matt can be found on Twitter at Chatham58. In case you're not aware, he's also now the owner of Rub Smoke Love, which I could say from experience has some of the best barbecue rubs around. They currently have two seasonings out, Beefcake and Gold Bark, and they're both fantastic. We got both of ours in on Monday, tested out on some fantastic steaks. So make sure you check them out, rubsmokelove.com. Today's episode, we're going to be previewing with Matt the upcoming Patriot season and see how we think of things will progress this year. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats300levelpod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary news of the day, and also at our website, pats300levelpod.com. So, Eric, if you want to take away with the first question for today.
Of course. And Matt, thank you for joining us. Really happy to have you here so we can talk some Patriots football.
Glad to do it. It's been a day of a whole lot of not that. So let's wind down here and have some fun.
Sounds good. So I think the first question that we just have is, from your experience, both as an NFL player and then just someone that has followed the team as well, how much can you really take out of analyzing training camp and preseason when you're trying to assess the transition to regular season expectations? I know a lot of fans and some media members are a little worried after seeing some training camp struggles, especially in the third preseason game, but also in the preseason, there's no game planning, changing plays at line of scrimmage. So is this something that fans should really be concerned about, or is it something that you just, how can you really assess it at this point of the
Right. No, it's a good question, Eric. I think in part because, listen, I did a dozen years at Nesson, and I had that job where I, exhaustively looked at every practice play. I was breaking down film, doing the all 22 of the preseason games. I wanted to be right. Like, that was the gig. The job was to be sort of, just that fire hydrant back to fans, to try to tell them all the little minutia that's going on with every little player and every little thing going on. But ultimately, and I know I do this a little different than some of the former players that have worked in the market and other markets and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm really, really into being right, which I know might sound like a terrible ego comment, but like, rather than trying to garner interest with a hot take kind of thing, like, I really want to make sure that, like, I don't say some shit that makes me look stupid later. And that's why I progressively, over the years of covering camps, started to put less in them, and when I was before COVID, when I was calling the preseason games, radio for a couple of years and TV for all those years prior to that, you're working it. So you're just really, really into the weeds about what's going on with each individual guy in their battle. But I sort of came to the point where I used to, do a massive breakdown on some film thing when I was doing the Athletic, or really kind of trying to take this snapshot that I had for maybe a 3 to 5 days of work, or maybe a game or two, or maybe just a really nice stretch of, joint practice work or something like that. And you're storytelling, right? You're trying to sort of garner interest, let people know what's going on with those guys they've been following so intently through the draft process, or the guys that they thought highly of that maybe didn't have the year they thought they would prior, and are they progressing? And all I really came to a conclusion is that there's a lot of faulty information. It's not that you can't learn stuff about the individuals, because you can, right? You can see progress. You can write down player X and say, you know what, last year he was pretty good at these few things, and he's got some work to do on these couple. And you can kind of highlight that aspect and say, okay, did he individually work on getting better at that? Is he actually kind of not losing in that aspect as much as maybe we saw him a year ago? Or all of a sudden, wow, he's excelled at it, so he must have really put work on that. But it is sort of fool's gold to try to take the collective and make a prognostication from that. And I learned that. I mean, there were years where, Brady-led offenses that would, Tom would have team periods. He's 19 for 20, and they walk right through the joints. They walk through they get two series of preseason game. They whip through them, and they end up being a good team. But in those years, they might be an 8th or 9th or 7th offense overall. It wasn't necessarily the years of being a 1 or 2 or 3, right? So I just kind of learned that, like, they're playing fake. You're playing a little fake. The things you should concentrate on are individuals. If you see a guy that just keeps getting beat over and over again, physically beaten, right? Blowing his assignment, struggling to sort of win a physical matchup, That's real. Like that doesn't not happen when the real bullets or whatever start flying. But a breakdown in a scheme, a play that doesn't work, a run stuff that didn't work might just be some sort of technique thing, or they were running it against the absolute wrong thing you would never do in a regular game. I think the thing you can hang your hat on, if you're just someone who doesn't want to have something to worry about or whatever and likes to look at big picture, this team is made up of all guys we all know about. Aren't really on the offensive side of the ball, at least. There's no like new, oh gosh, can this guy play in the NFL? Other than Mac. I mean, literally, Mac and Cole are your only two guys who are sort of perspectives, and Mac's already shown that he can, but he's just a growing guy. So I just simply say that to say, yeah, oh my gosh, there were all these struggles. Micah Wynn is still Micah Wynn. Trent Brown is still Trent Brown. Isaiah Wynn, when healthy, and that's probably his biggest thing is availability, is a very good player. We all have a high opinion of David Andrews. I mean, like, all these people, right? So they're going to have to mix and match and get it together. And this is just sort of watching the sausage factory. But where I think a concern or whatever can be real is when you have a bunch of people that you don't know yet how they fit in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And then you have those other issues. But these are all people that can play. So, is it a Super Bowl team? Well, that's silly. And that's too far away and nobody knows. Yeah. But they're good. I don't think you have to concern that they're somehow going to be bad at football. It's just that's just so far fetched. That's overreacting to sort of poor anecdotes in a joint practice week. It's not who I think they'll be.
Yeah, I think we both agree completely. And even looking back at 2020, that was probably the worst talented team that they've had in quite some time, and they still won 7 games and were in about 4 or 5 of the losses that were within a score or two. So if they were able to gather 7 wins with that team, I don't think there's some people saying, oh, they're going to be below 8 wins this year. Like that, I feel like that's insane. So,
yeah. And then other people that they forget is this is a team that won 10 games last year with their rookie quarterback. They're still returning 9, maybe 10 people on offense, depending on if you consider Michael Onwenu, because he started at guard, played offensive line. Now he's at guard, but pretty much all the playmakers, most of the offensive line is still intact. But that's just my 2 cents on that. But
no, I think it's a good point. Again, you're back to the point where when we reevaluate teams. So when I was at Nesson, we'd always have to do this thing where, especially in the last couple of years, they've really kicked up the talk about wagering, right? Yeah. The prior to them playing 16 or 17 game prognostication is to me one of the most foolhardy activities, but that we're all asked to do, but that exists out there. You don't know who's playing. Like, how can I tell you how many games are going to win? I mean, we can say 7, we can say 9, we can say these arbitrary things, but each of these seasons you're talking about something happened. Somebody got hurt. Somebody got hurt either for you or for them. Something that we thought would happen didn't. Maybe something that we never conceived would happen did. Teams that just, they haven't formed yet. So I think there's certainly, and it's not to just completely downplay what we think. The Bucs will be okay. The Bucs are going to be in it, right? The Packers will probably still be pretty good. But you can put teams within ranges, but it's just, I think we sometimes mix up the notion of placing a wager because it's likely to be within a range top above or below that to being a fan and somehow expecting your team's going to be that thing. But we just don't know. Those are just odds-based things, and throw 100 at it to make 1,000 kind of thing. I don't think a fan that's already counting on a losing record or already presumed that you're either in or out on a cut line with the playoffs. I think that's just silly. We just don't even know who's playing. We don't know how they'll play. They built a pretty good roster. It's not the league's best. It's certainly, above the cut line in the middle. I think it's a good-ish roster, and there's some question marks, but that's, I think, a better way to process it as opposed to being I'm the guy that said it in August and I knew all along that they were going to suck and be awesome. Like, that shit is just insufferable to me.
Yeah, that's very fair. One question that we do have for you is what do you take of the offensive coordinator concern or situation where we are going from Josh McDaniels, who's one of the best offensive minds in football, to Joe Judge and Matt Patricia? I for our website, I wrote a blog where it might not be as doom and gloom as some people are saying, since my reasoning is that everything's still going to be coming down from Bill Belichick, where when you lost Charlie Weiss, when you lost Josh McDaniel the first time, you went to offensive coordinators that hadn't called offense before. And then you didn't really see too much of a slippage, where in this situation, Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, even though they haven't called offenses, they were head coaches granted, not great records, but they still were in charge of game planning. Do you see much of a concern there? Or do you think everything's still coming down from Bill, or what are your thoughts?
So where I think there's sort of a hierarchy to where worrying about this stuff would be more real.
Yeah.
Let's take a team, hypothetical team, not this team, who is changing to an offensive coordinator who's never yet done it, right?
Yeah.
The issue, I think the circumstances where that would make more sense to be concerned about it would be the absence of a backstop. And by backstop, I'm talking about Bill, right?
Yeah.
It's not new guy comes in, is going to introduce a system from some other place, and he's got to teach it to 53 guys, well, not 53, but he's going to have to teach it to an entire offensive group how to do my thing, how to get it up to speed in a week sort of small off season. And the coach backing it isn't doing that stuff. He's bringing this from San Francisco, or he's bringing it from Houston, or whatever it would be, just hypothetically. So that's not this, right? So whatever your feelings were about who it is that's going to be doing the teaching, is that guy teaching something that the rest of the room and the staff behind him doesn't know? No. In this situation, the backstop knows it intimately better than anyone in the league. So the backstop is the expert. The backstop is using a vessel to teach it to the other guys. So you would have to, in that scenario, A, not have faith in Bill, not just that he could coach them through the season if need be, but B, that he doesn't have the discernment or judgment to see who can communicate and grasp it as well as he does to give it to the guys. So you have to believe that Bill, A, just doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah.
And that B, he's chosen a guy who can't teach it. So it's not, and that's the thing that drives me nuts a little bit, but I completely get it if you haven't had these experiences. It's not who picks the right Madden play. It's as an OC, it's the teaching part, right? And it's the choices. You use the words like game planning.
Yeah.
That's really, really important job with the OC. So the offensive coordinator generally addresses the room, just like, I see it from the other side as defensive coordinator, but the defensive coordinator's number one job isn't really to pick from the bag of tricks which one we're going to run. It's really more to teach and install and have the system in place throughout the course of the game for the stuff that works perfectly against who you're going against. So there is an experience element there. But again, like I mentioned, like if Matt was doing this at Detroit, okay, different conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like if he had taken over that role on that team, yeah, I would feel differently about it. But I mentioned that sort of your feelings on the backstop would have to be that guy doesn't know what he's doing, and he also doesn't know how to judge who can do it for him, it seems like a pretty silly gamble to presume that about that guy. The other part would be that Matt Patricia would need to be a dumbass. You would have to be concerned that, and this is the thing that I think annoys me the most about the conversation, quite frankly. Matt is one of the smartest guys that I ever met in football. He is one of the brightest, knows it inside out. If every fan out who's out here has written some wonky hot tape kind of tape type thing because they read his Wikipedia bio and there aren't enough bullet points there that say O-side, sit in a fucking meeting sit in a team meeting room, watch him walk through the scheme. Okay, he hasn't called such and such play, but he understands this as good as anyone who's done it for 20 years. You wouldn't walk out of that room after sitting and watching him run through for 2 or 3 hours and go, oh, that guy knows this shit inside out. Like the concern from the outside isn't shared inside, right? Yeah. So yeah, they're working, and you've gotten some good quotes from Mac Jones here, and I know Brian Hoyer a little better, as an older guy, and some of the other older guys in the room. Like this concern that fans have been whipped up to feel, I think a little bit by some of the media outlets. Yeah. Is not one shared by players. It really isn't. Now, it would be different if Bill wasn't there as the backstop, who was an intimately coaching kind of guy. And as a rookie, as a young guy, I played before I got cut and came here. Coach Vermeil was there in St. Louis, where I was before here. And Coach Vermeil was a little different at that stage of his career. Van stage, kind of similar to how Bill, like later in his career, kind of thing. But he was much more of an overseer. You didn't see Coach Vermeil come down and coach in with the defensive backs for a period, or spending a whole day with the O-line or something, bouncing. He was really more overseer. He had, Mike White was a former head coach of the Raiders, and you got guys all up and down the staff that have been in the job. If you had a guy who didn't still teach on the ground as much as Bill did, and then you had another guy who wasn't as sharp as Matt is, who was inexperienced. Okay, those are all different conditions, but the ones that they have are the ones where who in their right mind is worrying that Matt can't teach? That's not, and again, that's different than the Detroit thing. The Detroit thing is make personnel decisions and pick all the right people and have things go your way, especially when you don't have personnel control and you're inheriting a lot of players. And those are different things than what's going on now. So, and then I'll add one little extra thing that I think is super important. Matt wasn't asked to do this last year. And that's really important. That's really, really important. Josh didn't leave last year. Matt didn't come from Detroit to do this. Matt has been sitting behind the scenes doing stuff that people out there don't know about. And I guess I do, but I'm not going to share details of that. But like, this is a guy who has been doing that mentoring thing for 12 months, for however many more months until you got to see him do it on a practice field. So again, it's not just Bill guessing if some guy could do it. It's a guy I worked with for 15 years, whatever the hell it is, who's seen him intimately, how he processes stuff, how he communicates to other people, how he handles pressure, how he spins, how he handles the gig. And not only did he decide that he could be in this role, it was a long bleed. He took a year to figure it out. He had him behind the scenes doing other little, jobs that he had to get done, but also sort of mentoring during that time. So it's not as if Bill just said, you know what? I'm not going to get a Norv Turner. I'm not going to get a name. You guys know who coaches offense. I'm just going to make this one dude try it out this spring. That's not what happened. Like, I don't know why people keep saying that, because they just flip to the Wikipedia and go, I don't see any bullet points to say, oh, like that is not what's happening, people. So, and again, if Matt was a medium level intelligence guy, they didn't have the backstop and you didn't have the other year, and it wasn't a system that everyone had more or less been running anyway. I know there's this talk that it's new. It's a different part of the playbook that wasn't the lead. Now the 15 to 18 to 22% thing is now becoming the 40 and 60%. They're just running more of the spread stuff and they're running more of the simplistic zone scheme run stuff. So it is what it is, but it's not as if this is all, hey, let's go borrow some other team system and see if this new guy who's never done it before can teach it to all of us. That's not what's happening. So does that mean this is going to be a great month of September? They're going to knock it out of the park and they're going to be first in scoring? No, I didn't say that. But just thinking that these guys won't figure it out and thinking that these players won't be well coached is insane. They may not win. I don't know what the hell's going to happen, but it ain't going to be because they were poorly coached. Like, you can have a lot of concerns you want to have about things that go on in New England. It isn't going to be that they didn't have good instruction. That is insane. That's how I would look at it.
Great. I think we kind of agree exactly with what you said, and your insight from just being on the team, I think, really helps kind of drive that point home. Going on to Mac Jones, something we usually talk about on a lot of our episodes, how he's doing, how he's progressing. The second year leap is a big thing everyone's been talking about. What have you seen from him to think that he will take that second leap? And what do you really think of Mac overall from what you've seen kind of in the league and what you've been hearing?
So I'll back up a little bit to sort of this conversation about a change happening, and that the conversation with Matty P is going to directly affect what goes on with this new young quarterback who we all seem to feel really good about. I kind of wrestled with this as we were having off-season conversations about how this might go down, and I kept thinking in my head, you think of other guys, like a Baker Mayfield, who's kind of looked like at one point he was ascending and then it plateaus and then it goes negative and now he's bouncing. Think of, just pick a guy like that who did at some point, even Daniel Jones early on, there was sort of a, hey, Danny's got this, Danny Dimes and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then, then injuries and then plateauing and then, cratering and all that kind of stuff. Like, would it be better for Mac if he got 2 more years of Josh, and then there's some massive change right at that point where Josh Allen was Josh Allen? That's the way I look at it. Mm-hmm. Josh didn't look like anything like what he is now for the first, really even second year. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the second year, he started to really sort of open eyes a little bit, but consistently didn't put 2 of those seasons together. So do people really believe that if Mac had done another year of Josh this year and then had some massive change year after this, that would be good for him? I really don't think so. I think he's still in the formative stage anyway. Mm-hmm. So now is really the time to do it. If it would happen at some point, you're going to lose Josh some point. I mean, every year, every offseason, you interview him for 2 or 3 gigs. So it happened now. He found the opportunity. And I think now is the time. Why? Because, it's just, you expect the big jump in year 2. You expect the guy to sort of take over the place, but they made some really, really savvy sort of organizational decisions that, although Mac is getting the podium, although Mac's making a lot of the good comments, don't forget, Dev is still in the room. Brian Hoyer is still in the room, and he's not being given the podium because nobody wants to talk to the backup quarterback, but he's still one of the very strongest figures on the team. He's almost like a Pete Rose kind of like coaching and playing kind of deal. So remember, and count that into any of your concerns with a Z about, you know, how Mac's being coached. He literally has a sidecar that's teaching him everything. And remember, Brian isn't having to sort of just teach this old Patriots system and sort of retranslate it or whatever to this young quarterback. Brian used to talk about this a lot. Brian, because of the many places he's been, he's pretty much played in every offensive system you possibly could in the league. It was much different than each of the different spots. So he has such a breadth of knowledge. Again, a lot of people hate Brian, and I hate them that they hate them. If that makes any sense. But Brian is incredibly valuable to this whole situation. Again, add that as another layer of what not to quite worry about. It doesn't mean it's perfect on day one. It probably won't be. This is going to be something that'll be a slow rise, presumably, and they'll ascend to where they need to get. But you wouldn't want to have the people navigating Mac to this point than much different than this. The alternative is, say, the hot new coordinator, say, Mike in Miami now. Why am I saying Mitchell? McDaniel, excuse me, make something. Yeah, the other McDaniel. So say Mike was the hot OC out there, and he wasn't getting head coaching gigs, but Josh had left, and Mike's here in New England now, right? And he was doing so great in that Shanahan scheme. If they were reteaching the Shanahan scheme to the team right now from a guy that had been coaching, they would be in about the same spot. There would be some really fucking ugly weeks because there'd be, missed assignments and breakdowns that Bill sort of alluded to in his opener. I think it was after the second preseason game. And he'd say, and this is how this is processed as media members. It's just everyone sitting there with, a pair of binoculars and seeing negative play and needing to report which guy is the one that got beat. But there's a different way it's processed from a coaching staff. If shit screws up. If you've got, 3 different ways Matt could have lost because the left guard's getting crushed and we didn't pick up the blitz on the right and we ran the wrong route and Matt threw a bad ball and had poor decision. Okay, got team problems, right? But it's processed a different way when you're like, okay, everything was set here. We actually got the concept we wanted, but we missed one block, right? And we did that because, hey, we're communicating in a new way and we didn't quite do it. You guys understand that now? Okay, yeah. But then the media doesn't get to see them making the correction on Monday. They haven't seen that play again. It's out of view. And you kind of don't worry about it because you roll your eyes and go, "Oh, that's easy. We'll get that next time." That's kind of the mistake that's made once, but not twice. I think they're really in that world where, yeah, there was a lot of ugly reps out there, but you can look back at the play and say, "Oh yeah, but they're like an inch from getting it right. They just blew it at one spot." You're bad when you're blowing it at 3 or 4 spots. There's no way this could be successful. I don't think there's a lot of that on tape, other than some of the zone block stuff, which is they're still learning to do. And I wouldn't get people too concerned about that because they have the ability to, on a moment's notice, slide into what's working. And they're not so married to this offseason story that we have to be a zone team, They have the people on the roster to run other gap scheme stuff, and they could in a minute. And Billy Yates has played in it himself. And, Matt Patricia, when he was an O-line coach, has coached both. So these are not things that, they wanted to work on it more and install some more. They're required to play. They're when they go to Miami, when they start working their way through the schedule, they're going to start running what works best for them. There's not sort of, hey, we've committed this offseason thing. It's going to happen. So I just wouldn't, with Mac's development, I wouldn't be so concerned with some sort of cratering in year 2, because I think they've sort of built it around him to be successful. Keep your eyes most on how they handle the run game. Run game gets back to where we're used to. That softens pressure on him, and I think Mac just continues on the upward spiral. They're not able to run the ball. That obviously changes my opinion a little bit.
that makes a ton of sense. Just a quick question. One last thing on the offense before we go quickly on the defense. If you just had to list your biggest strength that you think is on the offense and the biggest concern, what would just those 2 be?
So this is going to piss people off to hear it, but hear me out on this. I still think their offensive line is the strength of the team on the offensive side of the ball. I'm better than the quarterback, and I like the quarterback a lot. But they have a next. They're not playing well together, but that's something with repetition and live reps and group together. They even screwed around for a little while there, where they were flopping the tackle sides. I know that Trent's now, we're all presuming to be the left, and and Isaiah the right. I mean, they've done both at this point. They've even popped Mike out Owino out there to tackle for some reps, and it kind of leaves your head spinning, like, what exactly are they doing here? And all it is Bill, and he loves to tinker. He likes to just try and see what we could use, because you may have injuries at some point. And on those days where he's tinkering, the whole system might not work quite well. But he's getting a look at how that one person handles that one situation. And is that something I could plug later in week 8 if something goes sideways? That's what that's about. I would go back to this point. Guys who can play in the league don't magically stop being able to play in the league. And we're not talking about fringe, starters, but just baseline, barely over the line kind of starters, like when I started, to be honest. We're talking about, like, Trent Brown is one of the biggest physical freaks in the league, and he can do a lot. He didn't have his cleanest season last season, but I still think he's a he's an A player. He's definitely an A player, and I think he could easily go back to right in a minute and just do everything that we've always seen him do. And maybe he'll handle left well too. I don't know, but Trent Brown can play in the NFL, so just you don't have to worry about it. He'll figure it out. I think the same of Isaiah if he can just stay healthy. Isaiah, though, I do think is the one guy that needs a lot of extended work at one spot, so he can just get back to getting comfortable. It's not easy to flip your feet. He's a guy who played left side forever, and now they're, hey, just be a right. He's probably the one piece of the 5 that, that might be the last thing to come around. Not that I'm worried about what he's physically capable of, but the continuity thing I think will affect him the most. David is David. David is a stalwart. He's the communicator. He's a leader emotionally, all that stuff. I just don't think you have to worry about him. There's not going to come a point where, oh my gosh, that guy's getting beat each down. What's wrong with this team? He'll be fine. Trent will be fine. Cole is a little bit of a question mark, but he really performed well. I mean, I watched for preseason games. I wasn't covering camp. I like his reps. He's really like a go down the field and finish it kind of guy. He's getting knockdowns on the plays away from him. He's got a nastiness to him. He's athletic as hell. He's different though. So that is sort of the challenge that's before Matt Patricia. Exactly. You have sort of a couple body styles that would be great for the get out and run old, like Denver Broncos, like it's Shanahan kind of thing, but like the hardcore zone run stuff where you really lead stepping and just racing to a spot and then trying to anchor and move. He's really good at that. He's great in screen game because he's more athletic, right? But he's different, so they got to figure out exactly which run scheme stuff works the best for them. But and then Owino is going to be a Pro Bowl player if you ever can just find a spot, keep him there, let him play 16 games so that people can know who he is and know where to vote for him. I think he really can be that kind of player. So again, we're back to 5 guys other than the rookie that you should feel pretty good about. It's not. And I think we fall into this. There's no I don't know, Dwayne Brown or Tyron Smith kind of guy. There's not one dude that's going to be a first team all pro necessarily, but that's a collection of A and high D type players. It really is. And if you wanted to place a wager, you're going to place a wager that they won't play well. They'll figure it out. They're pros. So I just think that that's actually a strength, although it may not look like one right now. It's just something that it would be against all odds for those 5 guys to somehow learn not to play. And it's actually an old Belichick line. Bill would always joke about this where, he would use it as sort of a thing with the coach, so they had a bad week the week before. You're coming up playing a team that played like dog shit the week before. Maybe they had a couple bad weeks in a row, and he'll pull up the film and he'd be like, okay, we're facing, I'll just use the Norv Turner example. We're using some guy that everyone knows your name. And he's like, okay, so they had a couple of bad weeks. Do you think this guy fucking forgot how to coach? Do you think he all of a sudden now doesn't know what he's doing? It's not just, you got to wipe from your memory this recent anecdotal stuff and know that you're going to get their best. And he's actually really good at what he did. He didn't in 14 days time forget how to do it. He had a couple of bad weeks. We all do, so I kind of feel like that should be what the feeling around this offensive line is. And I don't think they're a long-term bad bet.
That's a really good point. Thank you for that. Switching to defense now, I think one of the biggest I don't know if his biggest concerns, but biggest loss on the defensive side was JC Jackson, who is your number one cornerback.
Yep.
And they didn't really get any big names for that. They drafted well, or it looks like they might have hit on Marcus Jones and Jack Jones in the draft, but they have some more depth. What are your thoughts on losing JC Jackson? Is it as big of a concern, or do you think that bringing back Jonathan Jones and then filling it in with the players that they drafted, do you think that they'll be able to make it through?
So I definitely think this is the first time in a long, long time, other than maybe back to when Malcolm was sort of newly converted to be the lead guy, where you really have a team that has a collection of really good players, but there is not going to be a Gilmore type situation or a, Malcolm when he at his height, or even JC as he became more established, where he's the guy that takes the best guy every week. I don't think they're really going to do that. Maybe they're not built to, but I think clearly Bill has a sense of what guys can do. And I've always been told, this is sort of, we always remind ourselves, like, just because you haven't seen someone do it doesn't mean that he doesn't know that they can do it, right?
Yeah.
Like Jonathan Jones, hey, you're an inside slot corner. Well, he's not some stubby short arm, like 5'8" corner. He still has good length. He's really good multi-directional kind of dude. There's nothing in his profile or movement or way he performs that would say he somehow couldn't do boundaries. We just haven't seen him do it. Now, Bill could see him do it in practice for 4 years and just know that, in a minute I could do that, and this won't be a big thing. Now, granted, he's coming off an injury and he's doing a change, so that's a little bit of a challenge. But throw into that mix all these dudes who I don't even know what to make sense of them, like a Jabril Peppers, who we haven't seen a ton of. You mentioned the two Jones guys. You mentioned, Duggar, who we don't know, is he like a down strong safety or almost a quasi linebacker, or does he occasionally play almost like a slot position, which he can? You really have a bunch of safeties who can kind of be a part of this group. So I think this is sort of the 2022 thing minus an air quote lockdown guy, where you really have a collection of really goods, which is a better way to approach it, quite frankly. I think at this point in this NFL, wipe the Patriots thing from your head. Let's talk about some, hypothetical team that wears red jerseys or whatever it is, like some other city, some other look that you're not married to making judgments about names. What if you had to defend week in, week out teams that were running 3 and 4 wide receivers, would you want to spend all your money on one guy that locks down one dude and go A+ and C+ B- B, that kind of thing? Like that's not a good way to do it. It's literally, it's more parity helps you if it's high parity. It doesn't have to be A+. They don't have to be all pros. They don't have to be Pro Bowlers. But if you have a lot of really good dudes, it's a better way to match up. You may be forced in weeks where you have a real stud on the other side. A Tyreek Hill, maybe, don't matter who you have. There might be a doubling element. You might have to top him. You might have to play work on the floor and play on top of it. You might have to do man free, but then he's always being doubled from somewhere. They'll low with backer in corner or safety in corner, something. There may be, because you don't have a guy that you implicitly trust to run around the field all day with him. And usually nobody does that with Tyreek anyhow, but maybe that element's gone. But the other element where you're playing teams that have several goods, but nobody that's just, the guy that's just going to walk over if you don't double him. That's the way to be built. The way to be built is to be really, really deep with lots of good guys, because it's not a good spend to go put, in my view, $30 million on a corner and then have a bunch of rookie salary guys and just hope to survive, because all the cornerback's going to do is turn back to your vulnerabilities and great, go double him or go great. You locked him up, but we're using the breadth of the field. That's why we're running the spread, so fine, go take him away. We'll go somewhere else. And if you're weak in those spots, then you got problems.
Yep. And
that's really fair. That just made me just also think a little bit of when you played Buffalo last year, end of regular season in the playoffs, where you did have JC Jackson on the field as your number one cornerback, but since you had very weak depth, especially because of injuries, you got completely exposed. So since they seem to have more depth, it seems that even though you don't have that lockdown number one cornerback, they should be maybe in a better spot than they were last year.
Isaiah McKenzie had a day. Davis had a day. There's other, how much more important was it that you really, really win your battle at the 2, 3, and 4 spot, or maybe even 3 and 4. It might not even be 2. It might not even be 1 or 2, but you can still go find 200 yards in other places. And I think other teams have proven that.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we kind of have some hope for this season, based off of kind of the different moves they have, the speedierness at linebacker and safety, would just be that new linebacker group that they have. What are your thoughts on kind of how it's looking right now? It's a little bit smaller besides Bentley. They have those 4 safeties that they can use kind of intertwined with that. And then just Jennings kind of coming on as possibly that alternative to Matthew Judon on the opposite side. Kind of what are your thoughts on the pass rush and really that linebacking core?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go front to we'll go front to back. So I think obviously Matt is moving into like a top 3 or 4 figures on the team kind of guy. Like that not just from how well he performed last year, but how he's being given the podium. And when they give sort of their media availabilities and they put their few guys up that they want there, that just tells you the regard that the rest of the staff holds him. So I think Judon is sort of ascending into that. He's kind of their Willie McGinnis type or whatever, right? He's kind of a figure, he's a lockerhead type dude, and he's somebody that they really implicitly trust. So opposite him is going to be an interesting year. I mean, I want Anthony Jennings to do well because he's wearing 58. I mean, it's really that simple. I kid, but I actually cheer for the kid because I think he's had a real rough start to his career. He's shown some really good stretches of weeks and then struggled to stay healthy, right? So that sucks because he came in from Alabama. He's obviously played really high end football. He's got a chance to be good in this league, but he's just got to be able to string it together. I don't think it's necessarily a lockdown. Expect him to be there for 65 snaps a game all season long, because they still got to figure out how to use Josh Uche. And I tend to think that Josh is going to, at some point in his pro career, be more than a 15 snap just pass rush guy. There just seems like there's more there to me. So I don't know. I somehow the two of them are going to figure into either that side. I should also say this: Matt doesn't and isn't just playing one side. So Judon can flop. I think sometimes flopping helps so that you don't just zone in with him with one particular tackle. You can study him all week and just sort of work on him. You even let Matt work inside over guards from time to time, and then maybe you're not feeling healthier with those dudes. And you can always go big end with Dietrich. They do that from time to time. Dietrich Wise is power forward. He's closer to a 280 guy. He's different than all these other guys who are really more outside linebacker bodies. But they can do mix and match stuff where Dietrich goes end and it's more power the tackle. Judon could be inside. Uche could be working on the edge, kind of in a Winovich kind of role before, where he was just sort of the rush only kind of dude. But I'm really interested to see, there's a lot of ifs there, right? I mean, so there's, you need Josh to really ascend, and you need Anthony to become a full-time player. And I think they've both shown capability of playing that level. It's just we're not seeing the extended portion of it. So hope for the best there. On the inside stuff, like I joke about this because, I live in Rentham, and a lot of the guys are in Rentham and Foxborough and kind of around the area. And I really think you could walk into a Big Y, Shaw's, Stop and Shop, whatever's around here, and you could run into the safety group hanging with the linebackers. And I think a layperson walking through the aisle wouldn't know which was the linebacker and which was safety. Like their linebackers the same size as Duggar. Like they're big. Like the safeties that are 6'1" or 2 and 235. The linebackers are 6'1" and 235. Like they just don't run quite as well. And they run really well for backers. Like Mac runs really well. But they're really, it's impressive to me, because if this was our era, that's like Rodney Harrison is Rodney, especially when he would have his big off seasons and get bulky. Rodney right now is probably bigger than a couple of the guys that they play at backer right now. He really is. Like Raekwon's not a huge guy, but he's a thumper, and he runs real well. Mac is like a safety. He's in the box. And I'm not knocking him for being smaller. It's impressive that a dude at that size can hold up, can block a void, and can still shed and release on these guys that often weigh 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds more than him. It's just a different approach, and it's a different game. So they're going to be spread out a lot more, just 4 down and just 2 guys off the ball. They have to cover more ground, and those are the body types you want to do it if you're going to live in that world. The other ones, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Bentley, because I adore him in regular. Like he's a really good. I did an athletic column on him his rookie year, and so we did a few preseason games, and I really just watched like his key reading and the way his feet work and where his eyes are and how quick he is to read. That's something that like I think resonates with both linebackers, because you know how hard it is to take a false step or to not quite. He has a really, really good ability to to move correctly initially and do it quickly. And so he's good. He's a really good player. And I think he's incredibly underrated or maybe underappreciated here locally. Well, I think when he re-signed, people said, "Oh yeah, but he's one of the big ones, and he's not fast, so he's good. I guess he gets a lot of tackles, whatever." But no, he's really good. And you're still going to have to live in this league. It may not be 65% of the snaps, but it still might be 40 where they're in regular, where they've got two tight ends in the field, where there's a fullback if you're in that kind of team, and you need a guy like that. Like you need to make sure that first down doesn't take you to 2nd and 2. That's where you need a great reading, thumping linebacker who makes it, makes the open field tackle and sheds and makes the play. So having a guy like that on the roster really matters, and it's not of yesteryear. The of yesteryear thing is having 6 of them. It's not that body type is out of style or will ever be. There's just that part of the game is a lesser percentage. He's not going to play 85% of the snaps, most likely. He'll maybe slide down to 55 to 65% or something like that. But he's really important to have out there. So, I like the group, but it's just, again, it's sort of unproven because you're throwing Mack in there, who clearly looks like he can play. Raekwon, what are you going to get out of him? McGrone, don't give up on him. I know people are make a ha-ha joke of that. He comes off the injury. You have the lightest training camp in the world. You're basically doing nothing through May and June. It's sort of a joke. You get a camp that's quick, and he was a former 5th that's coming off an injury. You're basically still just in the rehab stage. They're able to stash him because other people look at it and go, he must just be broken, But I would just imagine that's a really nice situation, especially with Raekwon, who's more experienced, and Mack, who's been experienced, to come in and be in front of that there, and just he could still be a very good player. They still have a very high opinion of him. He's just not quite there yet. It's just, the one Bill used to give us this example when they first started changing to the CBA stuff, where they changed the practice reps. And he used to go through and say, okay, we're at, say, August 30th or whatever, just making this up. And the numbers here are completely fiction, but it's just more for the point. And he'd be like, at this point, 5 years ago, player X would have had 374 practice reps or something like that, right? And he's like, at this stage, he's had 104. And that's really kind of what's going on right now. And that's why coaches hate this, because the guy you're evaluating has done, markedly less work, and he has seen him tested markedly less. But there's this massive COVID expanded practice squad thing, and the real easy IR turn, and there's a lot of sort of bottom roster manipulation that's available. Guys like that are really getting a chance to, it's not like old practice squad. It's like you're really kind of there. You even see them throwing veterans on practice squad, which just blows my mind, but it's used for different things. And I think in that particular situation where not just the Patriots, but the entire NFL had a super high opinion of that dude had he not had the blowout at Michigan late. So then he drops. Everyone still thinks highly of him, but he's coming off a damn, a major injury reconstruction. So he's just not quite there yet. So I don't think we should presume that that's a lost cause. It's just you went with a couple of veteran options. It sort of smooths the path until that figures itself out.
That's really, really good perspective. Thank you for that. I think just last question we have on the defense is, I know you might have covered it a little bit, but just overall quick points, biggest concern or biggest strength you see from this defense.
So I talked about all these things, and it's unavoidable. And I think it's easily, in a real football world, it would dominate the conversation of the offseason. We would talk about nothing else. Who's playing offensive coordinator? Who gives a rat's ass? Who's going to call the plays? Who cares? They gave up 47 points and couldn't force anyone to punt. And that's how they exited the playoffs. That's all that matters. Like, literally talk yourself to sleep on the other stuff, and it won't matter if that part doesn't change. So the defense has to play at an extremely high level, especially if you're going to be a team that needs to run the football really well. You have a quarterback who excels in play action, and you're not asking him to sit in the gun and throw it 45 to 50 times a week. You don't want that. You have to play great defense and run the football. Those two things have to exist. Those things need to be there. And in the event that they are, we'll be talking about Mac Jones maybe making a Pro Bowl or something, right? But if they don't run the football well, if they're giving up scoring drives that happen in 7 plays, if the cycle is too quick and they don't get stops, you got a major team problem. And It won't matter who's calling the offensive plays. It won't matter who's coaching the O-line. It won't matter who's talking to the quarterback. It's those things drive the conversation in real life, in real football life. So I think you just need to understand that those things work together. And if you want this team, if you want to be one of those people that has concerns and make your list of things to worry about, if you could be given something to help them end up where you want them to be, you would love to know that they're back to being a top 5 defense. They're back to being a top 5 defense. They're making life incredibly difficult. They're up at in that top 5 range-ish again, and sort of turnover differential. They're causing turnovers. They're playing fast with all these small guys, and they're getting the ball off people, and they're mixing it up. And if that's going on, I guarantee you, without even knowing what's going on over the story and the narrative of the offensive side of the ball, is better than otherwise would be. If they were struggling, they're not going to fucking knock it out of the park on the other side of the ball. They're not. They work together. So I think if you want things to go well, defense has got to get back to where it was for, like 2/3 of the season where we saw it a year ago.
Great point. And I think we completely agree with that as well. Something we talked about on our kind of previous episodes. Last question before we let you go. A little kind of different subject. What's your favorite Bill story that you have overall of the years that you've played with him?
Bill story? I
know he's a great character, so
yeah,
he must have a lot.
I've told this one story probably too many times in too many other pods, so I'll go for the different one. So this was when I was, I was in New York for those 3 years after here for the 6. And when, I don't know if people recall this, but the Patriots filed tampering charges against the Jets during that time when I was there, and I was part of it. And I guess it was part to do with my transaction, maybe some other stuff that had gone on. You may not remember, but the CBA had kind of started and restarted. They kept changing the start date to the open of free agency. It was down when they were, this is the 06 season, I believe. So there was something going on there where the date kept changing and it got weird. And they had made some accusation that they had been contacting me prior, something like that. But there'd been a tampering charge. It wasn't a big deal, and it's just me. So no, I don't think it was definitely not big news. But I always sensed that there was some like hard feelings. I would have, my options were San Francisco, which I didn't visit, Houston, which I talked to but never actually went to, and Mangini went to New York. So it just kind of, I've been there with Eric for a long time. The opportunity was there, going to have a bigger role, play more defense kind of thing, and kind of felt like you need a change. So I went with Eric kind of deal. And I always saw those for those few years, especially with that tampering thing, to start things off. And, you don't get like a big warm fuzzy. Bill was always really cool with me, but it's very business, So, and Pioli, I loved, Scott was responsible for pulling me over off waivers from St. Louis to New England. And he was always a big advocate of mine. I really appreciate Scott and always have. But you don't communicate with these people for 3 years because now you play for sort of the enemy, right? So I just remember the first moment. So I decided to go get my MBA when I came back. So I was going to go to Babson. I actually applied at Babson, BC, and Harvard. And I had a condo in Bellingham. I'd been renting it out while I was gone to Doug Gabriel. Remember Doug? Wide receiver. Big snakes guy. Had a lot of snakes, which I didn't appreciate having in my apartment. Condo, whatever. But anyway, so I kept that, and I'd had the place down there, and we were trying to get rid of that. I'm like, damn it, we still have the other place. I'll come up there and apply to MBA programs in that area. So I did that. I went through 2 years of Babson. I wanted nothing to do with football. I had some preliminary talks with random stuff about maybe possibly coaching, but I needed to get away from it. It was 10th training camp, 9th season, just burnt out kind of thing. So I'm going to go get this MBA. But I'm back in the market where I was initially. Yes, I was, part of 3 Super Bowls, and that's cool. But I also played for the bad guys for the last 3 years. Like, there's kind of that like feeling when you're in your neighborhood, like, we cool here. So I just remember I started a restaurant down in North Attleboro, the great place that I had, and the executive producer, the boss for me is a guy named Larry Lawson at Ness. And Ness, he would come down to my restaurant and was trying to convince me to come do Patriot stuff. And I'm like, dude, I got this exceptional MBA. I'm doing small business startup stuff. And 20 things unrelated to football. I just don't want to go do that. And he kept pestering me about it. and I just do a segment once a week or something, and finally kind of pull me back in it. But then eventually it got to the point where, okay, now I'm doing a lot more Nesson, and then the Patriots This Week stuff, which is an in-house show by Crest Sports Productions, asked me to get involved. Then they're asking for the preseason stuff. I'm like, oh man, now I'm around the building. Like, it's one thing if you're up in Watertown or whatever, is now I got to go. So it was kind of that first, I'd lingered around the exterior of the team, but not been in the doors. So I hadn't had to have those conversations yet. And I think by now Scott's in Kansas City, I believe. So, but anyway, the point is I'm back in. I wonder if those are hard feelings. Oh, and there's the Spygate shit. So, and I have 0.0 to do with that. But I wonder if they wonder, right? Because I'm there with Eric, and we all knew things, and which is all nonsense, by the way. But anyway, you just don't know how they feel about you. And I certainly haven't. It's not like they're getting calls or texts from Bill. And I'm in the building for one of those Patriots This Week things for the first time. Long hallway, and oh shit, here comes Bill. So I'm gonna have that first interaction. And you're kind of like, oh, fuck, here we go. You just kind of walk in and like, you're going to look and do the quick like thing. Like, how's this going to go down? And he did the handshake and hug thing and like released seriously, like, 3-4 years of tension in my body, like not knowing how it was going to be. And he was super affable, and we chit chat and talk about stuff. And I really appreciated it. But the anxiety about that moment, and guys would tell stories like this even without all the other nonsense I had going on, but just even during the rough season where we had a bad loss last week, and you're going to pass Bill in the hallway, and it's a 50-50 if he's going to say hi or look up, and it's just there's always that kind of oddball tension, that, and then you had the I was with the bad guys, and like, does he hate me now? Like, I don't know how this is supposed to go down, but it wasn't that way at all, and I was sort of like, whew. Really.
That's an awesome story. Well, thanks again for joining us. And
thank you so much.
It was great to have you on. Again, everyone can follow Matt at Chatham58, or also check out his website, rubsmokelove.com. Some fantastic rubs. I know Eric
I actually have them here with me, but you know what? This one's like half empty because I've actually been cooking with it. That's Goldberg and that's beefcake. They're real. And I actually cook with them all the time. They're exceptional. So reach out on social media if you guys have any questions. I know people are ordering them like crazy. We're struggling as a company to keep up. That's a good thing. I like that. But use the DMs, use the follow stuff, and I'll answer questions about how to use them. I'm going to try to kick up the YouTube videos and the social content for the how-tos, but running a manufacturing company and a media, the social end of it, I'm just not quite there yet. So hang with me, but please do try them out.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. You can always follow us at Pat's 300 Level Pod, and then our website, pats300levelpod.com. So thanks again, and look forward to talking to you next week.
All right, Kevin. See you guys. Thanks.
All right, bye.